I don't want no oil, a spoil in my shoreline. I like fish much better than crud. I like birds and things, a-creeping and crawling. Won't trade no more oil for blood. The sun done give us all we need to make this country run. But that black demon oil's got us fussing and fighting, and I do believe it's time we was done. I don't want them nukes run by them kooks who think radioactivity is fun. No more three-headed frogs or kids with leukemia. Nuclear power ain't fit for a dog. The sun done give us all we need to make this country run. But that nuclear power's got us fussing and fighting, and I do believe it's time we was done. No nukes!
Good morning, Toledo, and good evening, Bowling Green. Good afternoon, Columbus, and hello to everyone on the internet, wherever and whenever you may be. My name is Joe DeMare, and I, for the next hour, will be your host at a fantastic radio program called For a Green Future. For a Green Future is a show where we talk about ecology and the environment. And we talk about it in the ways that it affects you, your wealth, your health, your happiness, the wealth and health and happiness of your dogs and your cats and your parakeets and your salamanders and your snakes and your turtles and pretty much everything that people keep as pets, as well as every other living thing on the planet, because, like it or not, we're all here on this little planet called Earth. And regular listeners to the show, well, immediately, I'm sure, picked up on the fact that I am flying solo today. Rebecca Wood is not with us today, sadly, because unfortunately, this past week, she was out walking her beloved dog, Tashi, and she had a bad fall on the ice. She broke her leg, and she's actually in the hospital right now. She had a little operation to sort of pin everything back together, and it looks like it's going to be a pretty speedy recovery, but she's in the hospital today. She might be calling in later just to give us an update on how she's doing, but it all depends on, what's going on in the hospital room during the next hour. So our wishes, for a very speedy and pain-free recovery are going out to Rebecca today. And today is, of course, Super Bowl Sunday, and as we do every year here on For a Green Future, we're just going to do an abbreviated Eco Bowl this year, because we like to pick the most environmentally sustainable team. And this year, hands down, there's just no competition. It's Philadelphia, because they have pretty much every sort of sustainability drive you could think of. The Eagles have going at their stadium. They've invested a ton of money on it. They recycle pretty much everything. They compost everything they can't recycle. And the stadium's like super energy efficient. In fact, we actually had the Eagles head of sustainability on our show a few years back. We did an interview with him. And so if you want details on why, Philadelphia is just hands down the better sustainability team and winning the Eco Bowl this year, just go back and look at that old episode. We're struggling along here without Rebecca, and the ice really is a problem even today. Driving in, it's the situation where you've got long stretches of pretty much dry road, and then all of a sudden you'll hit a patch that's all icy and slushy, and you could lose control there. So be very careful still out on the roads, even though most of them are pretty good at the moment. But I keep seeing descriptions of this, what we've just got over the last day or two here, as winter weather. It's going to be a wintry mix, and this isn't winter as I remember it. I mean, winter as I remember it is pretty much snow, and occasionally you would get some ice storms that would put a glaze on top of the snow. But mostly this kind of thing would be happening in the fall or the spring, because in order to get this kind of ice storm, this thing where everything gets a coating of ice, you need the temperatures to be hovering right around 32 degrees, which is warmer than normal here. And in fact, going back to the Super Bowl, they're going to be having record temperatures today down in New Orleans, almost 80 degrees down there. And, New Orleans is warmer than us, but that's like massively warmer. So, of course, they're in the Superdome, so it's not really going to affect the game. But it's just another case where, this whole thing is happening. The global warming is happening. And the ice storms in February, are happening. And I always talk about how environmental stuff affects your wealth, your health, and your happiness. Well, you can't get much more directly affecting your health than creating conditions where people are going to slip and fall and break their legs, like Rebecca just did, sadly. So this is coming at a time when, at the national level, the Republicans, President Trump and the people controlling the federal government basically are talking about getting rid of environmental regulations and allowing more pollution. Basically, they're trying to throw open the floodgates. They've actually talked about eliminating all environmental regulations. And we've gotten spoiled here in Ohio and in the US because we've had pretty good environmental regulations for a long time. And right here in Toledo, probably the best example are all those refineries over on the east side. Once upon a time, you could barely breathe over there on the east side. I remember, years ago, you'd drive through and the smell would just be horrible, and you'd be in your car, you'd have your windows up, you'd have your recirc on, and still that smell of the petrochemicals, the hydrocarbons, would penetrate into your car, and I could only imagine. I never lived like right there, right next to the refinery, the way a lot of people have, but I couldn't imagine what it would be like, what it was like to live there. If you are somebody who did live there back when there weren't all these regulations protecting the air quality, give us a call at 877-909-1007. And just, this is obviously a time where we need to be reminded of what it's like if you get rid of all environmental regulations. I mean, when Trump or Musk or Trump. I mix them together to call them mumps. But when they talk about getting rid of all environmental regulations, they present it as this wonderful thing that's going to save people money and stuff. But actually, it's pretty horrible, and there are a fair number of countries in the world that have little or no environmental regulations right now. I looked up, one example is Dakar, Senegal, right? They have the worst air quality in the world at this, today. It's a 210, which is, which is listed as very unhealthy according to the air quality index. By comparison, Detroit today has an air quality index of 67. So, it's 4 times, almost, it's 3 or 4 times as bad in Dakar, Senegal. And so that was causing 20,000 deaths a year. And, it was the highest cause of death in Senegal back in 2015. Now, since then, they've tried to put in some regulations. They put in a bunch in 2001 and another big batch of 2023 because they were still dying in large numbers. But another part of it is that these environmental regulations, in order to be effective, have to be enforced. And so Senegal has, after losing hundreds of thousands of people to air pollution in their city, they put in place regulations, but those regulations weren't being effectively enforced. And that's also exactly what Trump and Musk are proposing for the EPA. They want to get rid of all the enforcement officials, which means this terrible pollution. It takes us back, they literally want to take us back to the 1950s when the East Side was almost, it was almost unlivable back there. Like, well, I know about the 70s. That's when I was, I born in 62, so I'm not big on the 50s. But what happened then was it was almost unlivable there, and people did die. And so that unlivable is not an exaggeration, and that's what they're trying to take us back to. And so over and over again around the world, it gets proven that the only thing that prevents corporations from putting that amount of pollution in the air are enforced regulations, because those cost them money if they break the rules. And as long as a company knows that all the other companies also have to play by the rules, there isn't a big advantage to breaking the rules. We have competition between corporations in the US, or at least theoretically, that's what we've got. And so if nobody gets an advantage in that competition by poisoning the air and water around them, they're much more likely to stay within the regulations and not do the pollution. So when we hear things like that Musk is proposing to fire everyone at the EPA, what that means is Musk is planning to pollute the air to the point where you and your family may not be able to survive, because that is what is happening in places like Senegal that don't have a strong EPA, that don't have strong regulations. And so that's really what we're talking about. And if you think, oh, but it'll save tax dollars, you have to ask yourself, how expensive would it be to my household if somebody in my household got emphysema and required daily nebulizing and frequent hospital stays and lots of medical bills because they've gotten sick? And you very quickly will see that that would overwhelm any potential tax savings you might have. So those folks at the EPA are doing you a service. Basically, they're keeping your air breathable, and you should be grateful to them. We shouldn't be trying to eliminate them. Okay, so that was I got into everything I wanted in my opening rant. What do you think? Oh, and I specifically wanted to ask if anybody remembers living back in those times. Once again, I'd like to ask you, call in at 877-909-1007. What was it like to live downwind of all those refineries that we've got here in Toledo? So one of the benefits of enforcing environmental regulations is that wildlife comes back and you get a healthy hunting and fishing situation. And so I mentioned 2 weeks ago, I went out when we had our 2 weeks of cold and nice, thick, strong ice. I went out and interviewed some ice fishermen. And we're going to go to that interview in just a moment, but I just wanted to say, when I got home and I looked at these recordings I had made, I was kind of dismayed because the wind was so intense that really it was almost, it was pretty much unlivable or unlistenable. And I want to apologize for the quality of what you're about to hear, but it's amazing what software can do these days. It pretty much took out the wind noise. There's one little spot in the middle that I left it in just to show you what it was like. And I know Jared's probably going to be grabbing his headphones during that part. But let's remember that when we have a clean environment, a healthy environment, clean lakes, then we get to do fun things like fishing and hunting and birding, and it's really cool. So let's listen to our interview with some ice fishermen. I'm here at Metzger Marsh. See the lake area right over there with still got some open water on it, but here is the marsh area, nicely frozen over, and we're going to go out and see if we can't talk to some of these ice fishermen. It was incredibly windy the whole time I was out there. I have magically removed the wind noise from this recording using incredible digital technology. But this part of the video, you might want to watch this on the YouTube version if you're just listening on a podcast. But here I am walking out on the 12-inch ice, looking down at some of the methane frozen in the ice and the big cracks, 12 thick ice. So Well, we're out here at Metzger Marsh, and you've been out fishing. How long have you been out there today?
We were out there for about 3 hours or so.
Uh-huh.
We just caught bluegill. That's about it.
Ah,
We were gonna go on the lake out there, but there's open water, so we decided to try the marsh.
yeah, that's probably a wise decision.
There's pike and bass out there. I've heard. I want to try to get some eventually.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
So, you say this is your first time ice fishing?
No, I've ice fished before, but
Oh,
here
okay.
particularly.
Oh, this spot. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, what do you think about this year? I mean, were you thinking you might not get to go out? December was pretty warm.
I had my hopes.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I had my hopes.
hmm hmm So, how long you been ice fishing, and do you do fishing in the rest of the year too?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, I fish out here and hunt and everything.
Huh?
I miss having regular ice every year.
Yeah, yeah,
I wish we'd start getting it more.
yeah. How long you been fishing?
I've fished my whole life. I've only ice fished a dozen times in my life.
Ah, okay.
But I like to ice fish when I can.
Yeah, but you got the gear here. You
Yeah.
got the
Yeah, I got the gear.
yeah. That's cool.
Yeah.
So, all right. Well, are you glad you came, even though you only got one bluegill?
A bad day of fishing or hunting's better than a great day at work.
So you probably think that it's important to protect the the fishing, the environment.
Oh, naturally, yes.
hmm
Yeah.
Yeah. So you're in favor of like laws against pollution and things like that.
Well, of course, yeah. You can't be polluting and everything.
Yeah. All right.
People out here leave garbage, blowing the lake and everything like that. You know. Well, hey, every little helps. Everyone's got to do their part.
So would you encourage people to try this sport or?
Yeah, just do it safely and responsibly.
Right.
Just got to kind of know ice a little bit, and it's just use a little common sense. Let it get real cold for several days. Let it get thick.
Yeah, because every year there's stories about people who get stuck out there. Seems like.
It's just use a little common sense. If it's gonna be mild for a few days, don't go on it.
All right.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks very much. Oh, what was your name?
Matt.
Matt. Nice to meet you, Matt.
Nice to meet you.
Yep. So I'm out here walking out on the ice. Metzger Marsh. So here's a little bit where I'm just walking across the ice, filming the blowing ice and stuff, and here comes the narration back. Really kind of intense to be out here on ice in the wind. This is an area that's normally water, probably out here, probably about 20 feet deep or so. Just looking down through this ice, bubbles of methane tried to come up, frozen in the ice. It's an intense thing that you can't really get this experience in a lot of places in the world. So, and it's happening less and less often here. So it's kind of cool to get out and take advantage of that. Thank you. Here's a little bit of unedited wind noise, just to give you an idea what it was like. So during this part of the video, I came across a fishing hole that had one of those automatic little spring-loaded things there that has the little flag that pops up when the fish bites the hole in the ice. Then I did a panorama just around the marsh where you could see the trees off in the distance and the big Phragmites sticking up through the ice, and then the snow blowing across it. It was really kind of intense. And so next I managed to interview some actual fishermen on the ice. So what are you guys' names?
I'm Griffin Austin. Braden Finch.
Braden Finch. Hi. You guys are out here Metzger Marsh ice fishing. Yeah. Have you done that very long or?
I've been doing it since I was about 7.
7. So you got your hole there. You got just one. You got 3 going.
Yeah.
Your nice little tent here. Is it keeping you warm?
It is. Yeah, it's really windy though.
Yeah. So you've been doing it since you've been 7.
Yeah, just around
You noticed like a change when you were younger to today? I mean, less ice.
there. No, not really. Right now we have a bunch of ice.
Uh-huh.
And it's a little overfull of ice.
But December was, of course, there wasn't anything in December. Yeah. So how is it that you guys came to choose this spot? So here they told me that this is a place they normally came when they fished summertime, when they did kayaking. Haven't caught anything yet today.
Just got it minutes ago.
Oh, okay. Okay. So how long do you expect to be out here?
Me too.
They also haven't caught anything yet. Would you encourage people to try this sport? I mean, is this something? Well, it looks like you just convinced your friend to do it.
Yeah, but definitely not buy like
Oh, yeah.
like a shanty with this big, it's big huts.
Great. Yeah. You gotta get the shanty. You gotta get the gears. Does it make a difference? Like the lugger?
Oh my gosh. Wow. It's just
You got what are you using on your hook there?
it's just a jig with a
I'm heading back out to the lake shore because I wanted to show you guys the open water that Matt was talking about. Now, the official story that NOAA says that this area of Lake Erie is actually 100% ice covered, but see, it's a little more comfy than that. You actually might have a hard time seeing them on the video because of course, they're white. They blend right in. But that's an interesting thing. I never saw swans sitting out on the ice before. And there's a lot of birds that are kind of concentrated around the open water. Actually, I can see there's more than one stretch. Out on the pier here, got some gulls flying around me. The sky is very nice and clear straight up, but there's the haze all around the horizon. And then, of course, over to the east, the Davis-Besse. I can see the Davis-Besse nuclear power plant. It's huge plume of water vapor going up in the air, and that's definitely contributing to that haze that's along the horizon. But of course, what they're doing, water vapor is actually greenhouse gas. So, but we're coming near the end of the pier. Ice piled up on top of it, so this is as far as I go. But I'm seeing it's about 100 yards out. I see the open water. Okay, well, that was it. And once again, I apologize for the quality of the audio there, but you might have got an impression of just how brutal it was in terms of the wind and the cold. And so I put so much effort into getting those interviews that I didn't want to just toss all that in the can. So thanks for your patience. And yeah, it's definitely, if you could get out there at some point, and yeah, I don't know, you don't even have to try ice fishing, but just, go check out the lake when it's frozen. It's really a great experience. Okay, and another great experience that we have every week here is we get to thank our patrons. And our patrons are wonderful people who've gone to patreon.com. That's Patreon. And there we searched for a Green Future. Up popped our Patreon page. And then people were able to look down through and pick a membership level that matched their budget. And so every month, a little bit comes out of their accounts, comes over to us. And that's one of the most important ways that we have for bringing you this program every week. So thank you so much to our patrons. And we are also this week welcoming back our advertiser, Wood County Park District. So imagine a place where nature meets adventure, where you can climb, paddle, fish, and explore. That place, it's right here in Wood County. The Wood County Park District is here to protect, preserve, and inspire. We conserve natural and cultural treasures so you can enjoy the outdoors like never before. By maintaining green spaces, providing fun programs, restoring wildlife habitats, and leading outdoor adventures. Do you want to connect with nature? Well, try your hand at archery, bouldering, geocaching, paddling, rappelling, and more. Whether you're seeking experience or a peaceful retreat, our parks are open every day from 8 a.m. till 30 minutes past sunset all year round. Come and explore. Get outside, experience nature, your parks, your adventures waiting for you. Find us online at wcparks.org or follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and X. Or you can call 419-353-1897. The Wood County Park District, preserving nature, creating adventure, and inspiring a greener future. So back to the show. We were hoping Rebecca would be calling in pretty soon here, but like I say, she has no control over what's going on in her little hospital room there. So we'll go right to ecological news. And so our first story is from the Utah News Dispatch. The date was January 21st, 2025. The title is Pacific Corp Extends the Life of Utah Coal-Powered Plants Indefinitely. It's a story by Alexel Cabrera. And unfortunately, in Utah, they had a couple coal plants, the Hunter coal plant and the Huntington coal plant. They had been scheduled to shut down, one of them in 2036, the other 2042. But now Pacific Corp, which is the parent company of Rocky Mountain Power, which is the utility that actually immediately owns the coal plants, they've reversed themselves. They've flipped around and have decided to just keep burning coal indefinitely. And the reason they gave is they said the state and federal regulations are changing. And also, they've been allowed to increase their rates. They increased the rates by 18.1% this year. And so like an almost 20% rate increase means they can afford to keep the most expensive form of energy, one of the most expensive forms. Nuclear is the most expensive, but coal is much more expensive than wind or solar or gas. But because they've been allowed to increase their rates, they've decided to keep the expensive coal plants open. Now, even though they are keeping them open, they are changing their use a little bit. They're not really using them as baseline, which is when you have a power plant that goes at 100% capacity 100% of the time. They are keeping them sort of on partial standby. That is, they're keeping them down at 50% generation capacity, because then they ramp them up when the wind and the solar go low. But wind and solar are so much cheaper that even with their rate increase, they like to make a profit. So they buy the cheap wind and solar power as much as possible. And then when those get more expensive, then they ramp these coal plants up from 50 to 100%. And in fact, the wind and solar electricity are anywhere from a half to a tenth the cost of the coal power. But unfortunately, Pacific Corp is also dumping their plans to build new wind and solar. Well, actually, they're putting them off. They're pushing it back they don't plan to build any significant amount of wind or solar for another 10 years. And the reason for that, part of the reason they were building the wind and solar was because we had a regulation. We had in the Clean Air Act something called the Regional Haze Standards, because you might have heard that these coal plants are causing problems. Like when you go out to look at the Grand Canyon, coal plants put out so much smoke it causes a haze, and so you could be at one rim of the canyon and not be able to see the other rim, which really cuts into tourism. So they had regulations saying that you need to reduce that haze, which made it more expensive to run the coal plants, and so they were moving towards phasing them out. But now they're counting on that regulation getting gotten rid of. They're counting on there not being regional haze standards, which means they get to make the air as hazy as they want and hide as many monuments behind smog as they want. And so this is not a good sign. This is Pacific Corp like looking at what's happening in the federal level and just saying, you know what, we're just going to go all dirty again, because they don't actually have any moral sense. They weren't moving away from coal because it's the right thing to do, or it's protecting, the world. They were doing it because there were regulations that were forcing them to do it. And going on to our next story, the reason we have a lot of these regulations, especially the ones talking about coal or about CO2 pollution, is of course global warming. And there's a story in The Guardian, February 4th, temps at North Pole 20 degrees centigrade above average and beyond melting point. And so 20 degrees centigrade is just about like around 38 degrees Fahrenheit or so. So temperatures at the North Pole, even as we had our cold snap, temperatures at the North Pole were about approaching 40 degrees above average, and the ice at the North Pole has started to melt already. So they hit this peak last Sunday, and the poles are warming much faster than the rest of the globe, because when you melt the sea ice is reflective, and the sunlight comes down, it hits that nice white, that nice clean sea ice, and it reflects back off into space, and so that keeps the poles keeps the poles cold. But if you get rid of the ice, then it no longer reflects the heat back out. The ocean absorbs the heat, and so now the warm ocean has an even harder problem creating the ice in the first place. And when the ice is there, it melts much more quickly. So this information came to us from the EU's Copernicus Climate Change Service. There was a professor named Dirk Notz, University of Hamburg, and he made testimony that the ice caps will melt and may be ice-free sometime in the next 20 years, which is terrifying, because once the poles are ice-free, then the heating will happen even faster. Now, I've been seeing some disinformation lately from the anti-global warming people who've been posting these things on social media saying, oh, they had predicted their poles would be ice-free by now. Well, two things there. One, a few of the models predicted ice-free by 2024. The majority did not. But the other is that, okay, it's not happening fast enough for you. You want the Earth to heat up beyond livability even faster. You're happy that it's taking a little bit longer than a few of the scientists predicted. It's kind of crazy that they're using that to try to. They're using the fact that it is melting, but not as fast as a couple of the scientists predicted, to try to throw out the whole idea of global warming. But in opposition to that, we have another story that was in The Guardian. Hottest January on record mystifies climate scientists. And this was on February 6th. And the scientists have been amazed because they got the La Nina, which is supposed to cool the planet, but it didn't. We got a little cooler here in North America, but the rest of the planet just blew past all kinds of records. The Arctic sea ice had a record monthly low in January, and the scientists may be mystified, but if Rebecca were here, I would turn to her and say, but we're not mystified, are we? Because we know it's and she would say, positive feedback loop, which is, so clear that that's what's going on, that basically the global warming, the putting carbon in the air creates heating releases more carbon, which creates more heating. That's a positive feedback loop, and that's what's happening. So next story, Heat Map News. This is a website, or heatmap.news, excuse me, February 4th. The title is Trump has paralyzed renewables permitting, leaked memo reveals. And we reported last week how Trump has just banned offshore wind and all onshore development of wind and solar in public lands. But according to this story in heatmap.news, he has managed to derail the entire commercial wind and solar industry, both land and offshore, by ordering the federal agencies which need to give permits and permissions, ordering them not to. And basically, any developer of a wind farm or a solar panel farm, you have to get sign-offs from the federal government, like the Army Corps of Engineers and the Fish and Wildlife Service, to make sure you're not damaging a wetland or hurting the habitat of an endangered species. And so Trump has succeeded in stopping all wind and solar development in the country by ordering those agencies not to respond to any of the applications. And if when you're doing a multi-billion or multi-million-dollar project, every day that you get delayed increases the expenses and makes it less likely that you're going to actually manage to finish it on time and on budget and make any money on it. And so this is shutting down the entire renewable energy business is monumentally stupid. Solar is a $100 billion a year industry. Wind is also a $100 billion a year industry. So Trump, with two executive orders, with two strokes of his pen, basically just pulled $200 billion out of our economy. Plus, remember that the electricity that comes from the wind and the solar is so much cheaper than any other electricity that actually saves you money on your electric bill. But apparently, and according to Forbes, the Republicans and the Democrats both used to have a, quote, all of the above energy policy. Okay, we'll do wind and solar, but we'll also do oil and natural gas and nuclear, just because we love energy so much. But what has happened is under Trump, the Republicans have shifted to an only the worst energy policy. He's promoting only the most expensive, the dirtiest, the slowest, the least practical, and it's just amazing. All right, well, so we have Rebecca on the line. Hey, Rebecca. Hey, hi. How are you doing?
Broken hips are not fun. I can tell you that much.
So it is.
And I'm enjoying the view from the Toledo Hospital of the dump and the Willis B. Boyer and the neighborhood and everything.
Well, okay, good. You got something to look at. That's well. So I'm really sorry this happened. It happened while you were walking Tashi, you say?
It did, yeah. For once, she was behaving herself too, and which is ironic considering the many, many times she's dived in front of my feet and tried to kill me.
Uh-huh. So
no, just a big patch of ice that it had been a puddle, you could tell. And yeah, I just went down fast and hard on my right and couldn't move anything without screaming.
Man, I'm sorry.
So then it's very nice though, because 3 people pulled up and offered to help within 15 minutes, and a couple of them went and got my roommate so she could bring Tashi back, because I was afraid of I didn't know what the paramedics were going to do. They're probably not going to want her or want to drop her off at our house on the way to the hospital.
Yeah, and they definitely probably wouldn't finish walking her.
Yeah, probably not. No, I'm guessing no. So yeah. It took forever to. I have tiny roly veins, and it took forever to get it. They finally gave up trying to get a needle into him and just squirted some fentanyl up my nose.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was wild. I had my first ambulance ride and my first overnight hospital stay, and it's been a few days of firsts for me.
Wow, banner year for you. So I'm sorry, really sorry to hear this, Rebecca. And I'm sure all the listeners are too.
Yeah, I'm not having a good time, but it could be worse. I guess it's actually just a high femoral fracture.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
So that means like it just needed a pin driven in, and it didn't. I don't have to have a hip replacement, a full hip replacement.
Well, that's good. That's,
Yep.
and so you're in the hospital for a couple more days and then rehab, I'm guessing?
Probably, yeah. They're working on it. Probably nobody's going to hear back from, like the rehab centers because it's Sunday, But there's a good chance tomorrow I'll be transferring somewhere.
Okay. All right. Well, hey, good there, Rebecca. Definitely. And,
Will do.
we'll get you back on the show, as soon as practical, one way or the other. So.
Definitely. All right. See y'all later.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
All right. Well, it's good to hear from Rebecca. She sounded pretty good, and she's listening in. So if anybody wants to call and wish her a speedy recovery, feel free. 877-909-1007. Okay. Next story. This is coming from a bulletin from the nonprofit Earth Justice on January 29th, 2025. Trump has convened what's called an extinction committee. There's a provision in the Endangered Species Act that says that if protecting an endangered species causes like a critical problem for the country, for some reason, it could be possible if you get a whole bunch of experts together, they might be able to say, okay, well, you can go around the regulations for this one case. Luckily, it's a committee which has almost never met because most of the time 99% of the time you can protect the species and preserve the environment without having to, basically decide to make a bureaucratic decision to eliminate a species from the planet. In fact, Endangered Species Act has been 99% effective
in protecting the species that get endangered species protection. But what Trump has done with another one of these horrible executive orders is he's created the ESA committee, and he's ordered them to meet quarterly. It hasn't actually met in years, but he's saying now you're going to meet every quarter, and you're going to pick which species we're going to allow to go extinct, that we're going to wipe off the face of the planet forever. And that, of course, is exactly the opposite of what the 1973 Endangered Species Act was supposed to do. That was one of those few times in American history, human history, when everybody all across the political spectrum got together and said, we can't let these species just vanish forever. And it's been really effective, partly because it doesn't just protect the species, it protects the habitat the species needs to survive. And so it's not a question of just, having the last 2 elephants in a zoo and saying, okay, we've still got elephants. This allows you to keep the whole ecosystem that supports each species functioning, which we have now learned, from 50 years of ecological science, is also absolutely essential to keeping us healthy and fed and having water to drink. And so, but basically Trump has said, okay, you guys meet quarterly and start killing stuff. And it's important to note that every one of our photogenic species, every one of the species that everyone loves, like grizzly bears, wolves, salmon, orcas, had we not had the Endangered Species Act in 1973, all those things would now be gone, because the hunting pressures, the development pressures have been so strong that without the Endangered Species Act, without that regulation, by now all those things would already be extinct. So this is not good news for anybody. And I also like to think this is not what the people who voted for Trump voted for. I mean, I'm really hoping my faith in human nature isn't misplaced enough that people went to the polls thinking, we don't like wild animals, let's vote for Trump so he can wipe them out. I don't think that's what people voted for when they voted for Donald Trump. Okay, but this is not just happening, of course, in the U.S., all over the world, unfortunately. anti-environmental governments are coming in and doing stuff. So for our next story, we go over to the UK, and this is actually from the official government website of the UK, www.gov.uk, and their title, Government Rips Up Rules to Fire Up Nuclear Power. And essentially, this official government press release reads like official government propaganda. They're calling nukes clean power. They're saying they're permitting SMR, small modular reactors. There has been a law in the UK that specified 8 places in the UK where you could build nuclear power plants, because those places were chosen based on things like distance from a population center, suitable land, no dangers of earthquakes or floods or things like that. But the Labour government under the Prime Minister there, Keir Starmer, had just threw out that 8-site rule and now says you can build a nuke plant anywhere in the UK. So you could build one right in the heart of London if you want to, thanks to Keir Starmer. And the reason that they're doing this is because the government is desperately trying to find investors for their new nuclear plant, Sizewell C. And no one is touching it because it's all, the last nuclear plant that the government has tried to build, Hinkley C, is already 5 years late and $100 billion over budget. And that's the same as, every nuke plant people have tried to build since the 1990s. And so finally, investors have said, fool me once, shame on me. Fool me like 12 times, all right, shame on me. So investors have finally wised up and realized investing in nukes is a good way to lose money. And so in order to woo these investors, the Labour government under Keir Starmer has torn up, using their own words, rips up a lot of environmental regulations. And again, they're claiming to do this because they want to get away from your Russian national gas, which is, that's admirable. But the problem is that now they're just switching that for Russian uranium, because Russia is one of the largest suppliers of uranium to the EU. So it doesn't make any sense. And it's just another example of the nuclear propaganda that's going around the world right now. So anyway, after all that bad news, I decided to end with 2 good news stories. First one from Smithsonian Magazine, December 20th, smithsonianmag.org. And the title is, Officials Declare the U.S. Free of Murder Hornets in Rare Victory Against an Invasive Insect. And so, we reported on murder hornets way back in 2019, our first year of the show, because they had found them in Oregon. And they're really terrible insects. They're like hornets they're 2 inches long. They're the biggest hornet in the world. They have as much venom in them as a snake, like a rattlesnake or something, 7 times as much venom as a honeybee. And it's literally one of the most painful stings in the animal kingdom. They kill 30 to 50 Japanese people every year, which is where murder hornets are from. And they devour bees. They wipe out bee colonies. Now, the Japanese bees have developed a defense against them. What happens is that when a murder hornet gets into the bee nest, the workers swarm on top of it, and using their wings and their body heat, they cook the murder hornet. They attack it with their body heat until it dies. The U.S., the North American bees don't have any strategy for dealing with murder hornets. So once they get in, they just literally eat all the bees. So good on the university, the U.S. Department of Agriculture and all the different agencies that came together. It's been 3 years since there was a sighting of a murder hornet in the U.S., so they've declared victory. And so you can remove murder hornets from that list of environmental stuff that you worry about. Looks like you're going to be safe from murder hornets. Last story, and I do this one because this is just kind of a nice, this is the way things should work kind of story. A fellow named Peter Sinclair has a blog. It's called thinkblog, THINC.blog. And the THINC is for This Is Not Cool. He studies global warming issues. And the title is that there has been an approval of a solar farm in Michigan. And the reason this is significant is because both Fox News and the Mackinac Center, which is a right-wing think tank up there in Michigan, put out tons of disinformation about it. In fact, Fox News ran a story titled "Evil Solar Developers Want to Cut Down Virgin Michigan Forest for Solar." And it turned out this fellow, Peter Sinclair, actually went to the site, and it's not virgin forest. In fact, a lot of it doesn't have any trees at all. A lot more of it had been recently logged because it's part of what the DNR, the Michigan DNR, calls the working property, where they raise money to help fund their conservation efforts. It's also got power lines. It also has 14 oil wells on it. So this is a property near Gaylord, Michigan, in Hayes Township. And because of all the disinformation, there were actually threats of violence. The Michigan militia was threatening to come in and mess up the township meetings where they were going to give the approval for this. But it failed. The threats of violence never materialized. The disinformation was revealed as disinformation, and so this solar farm has gotten the permission to go ahead. And so that's some good news coming out of Michigan. And so, well, actually, that's it. I've run through all my news stories, and it's a little. We're still got a few minutes left here, so if you 2 minutes. So if you want to call in, please do it. 877-909-1007. And it's really a difficult time to be an environmentalist, because we're seeing them try to roll back things which took us years to put into place. And remember, almost every regulation has happened because harm came to people, and then they said, oh wait, this is killing people, this is making people sick, this is killing wildlife, and so they would put in regulations to stop the harm. And so we get spoiled because we've been living in a society that did regulate pollution and did regulate polluters, and we forget there's few people today who remember that the Cuyahoga River in Cleveland caught fire because there were no regulations over what the chemical companies lining the Cuyahoga River could dump into it. And so you had the situation where you had fire trucks parked alongside a river spraying water on the river to try to put out the fires, because the fires were actually threatening bridges and things, because, and that was just sort of tolerated. And I remember when I was a lad, I went to Lake Ontario because my uncle had a cabin there right on the shore of the lake, and millions and millions of dead fish were washing up on the shore, and it smelled terrible. There were clouds of flies that were laying eggs in these dead fish, and I was saying to my uncle, this is when I was I guess probably around 8 years old, I said, what's going on? And he said, well, we've changed the environment by putting pollution in there. I said, but what happens is the fish are adapting, and some will die, but the strong will survive, and then they'll be able to live in the pollution. And no, even as an 8-year-old, I knew that was BS. And luckily, happily, people passed the Endangered Species Act, they passed the Clean Water Act, they passed the Clean Air Act. And that's why we're in a society that can breathe and drink water and have some critters and some fish to go out on the lake and catch. So without those regulations, we would not have any of that. So when you hear about these plans to eliminate all regulation and eliminate the EPA, you shouldn't be cheering it on. You should be trying to stop it. That's my opinion. Thank you so much for listening. And hopefully we'll have Rebecca on, maybe calling in next week. But This is Joe DeMare, and I am signing off.
No. I don't want no oil, a spoil in my shoreline. I like fish much better than crud. I like birds and things a creeping and crawling. Won't trade no more oil for blood. The sun done give us all we need to make this country run. But that black demon oil's got us fussing and fighting, and I do believe it's time we was done. I don't want them nukes run by them kooks who think radioactivity is fun. No more three-headed frogs or kids with leukemia. Nuclear power ain't fit for a dog. The sun done give us all we need to make this country run. But that nuclear power's got us fussing and fighting, and I do believe it's time we was done. No nukes!